Hello, everybody. We'll give a few seconds for everybody to get settled and in the room, but welcome. Welcome, everybody. Again, we'll give a couple of seconds here for everybody to get comfortable for our night to talk about innovation. So we appreciate everybody joining us, and we'll give it another few minutes, a few seconds. Welcome, everybody. My name is Robert Cody. I will be your host for tonight. It's just one of those fortunate things, a gift I get as the head of school is to sit with some great people and talk about the future. So I do appreciate that opportunity, and I appreciate you joining us. Tonight's topic is the world needs innovators. This is the last of a 4-part virtual speaking series by ACS, which was hosted also in the 3 schools in the UK. This is the final installment of that series. So we're pretty fortunate to finish it out. Innovation is an integral part of an ever-changing world. If not vital to its survival or to its thriving, innovation is a critical part of that. Every few years, we notice the world shifting dynamically. From technology to globalization and even climate change, our world keeps advancing, and so must we, to continuously adapt and innovate to keep up with it. But we must ask ourselves, how well equipped are we to innovate in the face of our current crisis? Here in Doha, we are now 100% online again in the school. We had our students in school, and now we don't. In the UK, I think it's the opposite. Now they have students in school where they used to be online. So this is an ever-changing world, and this is a learning for all of us in this time of crisis. It shows us how important it is that the world needs innovators. So this virtual webinar will delve into this in detail, the question in an attempt to find avenues for change and opportunities to create. So I want to thank the parents, the students, the staff, prospective parents, our partners at ACS, and the media for joining us here tonight. And of course, our speakers and all the people who set up tonight's webinar. We have about an hour to talk to these 3 speakers with opportunities for questions and answers after each talk. So thank you, everybody. I would like to introduce you just quickly to the 3 guests, and then I'll introduce them in a little more detail when we ask them when they speak out. The first person is Mr. Ghanim Al Sulaiti from Qatar. Welcome. It's good to see you.
Thank you so much. Of course, honored to be here.
Yep. Our second guest is Tamsin Greulich-Smith. Thank you for coming. You're in Singapore. Ghanim is here in Qatar. You're in Singapore, so welcome.
Thank you.
And then we have Miss Brianna Gray, who is in the UK. So welcome, Brianna.
Thank you.
Okay. Once we get going, we'll have time for questions and answers. So please use the chat, or you can raise your hand, and Mr. Salman and Miss Catherine and Miss Karen are here to help us make sure all your questions are answered. If you're with your children and it's a student question, please just let us know that too, so we know that it's an adult question, a student question. It may help us answer it better. I also want to thank or welcome all the people who may be in the UK schools to this webinar. This isn't just a Doha thing. There could be people in our room from one of the UK schools as well. Our first speaker is Mr. Ghanim Al Sulaiti. He is a young Qatari, and I don't know how much longer we could say that for. You still look unbelievably young, you're a young Qatari-based entrepreneur with a focus on sustainability. You have multiple businesses and a passion for creating positive impact in the society here and outside of Doha through a plant-based lifestyle. Mr. Ghanim is going to explain and share how innovation has been a driving force behind his business expansion, and clearly, if you're in Doha, you know success. It's an incredible business success, and we really welcome you joining us. And if you just want to kind of share with us your thoughts on innovation and how you've led this.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for having me today. I'm super excited to be sharing a little bit of my message and a little bit of my vision that I had for Qatar, but also for the world and for this community. So I started my journey back in 2016 with my first business, Evergreen, which is the first vegan cafe in Qatar. However, my actual journey started, I would say, 8 years ago when I discovered more about my health and my wellness and what actually things that I can do to my diet and to my lifestyle that can make a big impact, not just on me, but also on the communities and the earth. And I think that's the point when I felt that innovation was really important for me to kind of change the way people see food and the way people perceive, I guess, food. And I think at that time, I didn't have much ideas. I wasn't, I would say, that creative. I think I started questioning everything around me. I started asking questions. I started traveling the world. I've been to almost 33 countries back in 2014 and 2015. And the reason of those, like me traveling to those countries, was just for me to ask questions and be able to meet people on the same lifestyle and diet and try to understand if that's something that's sustainable. Is it something that people actually need to do? Is it something doable? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a religious thing? Is it something that is just a trend? Is it something that we here in the Middle East can implement and can have a huge impact on? And I think from those, I guess, experiences and journeys that I had kind of, let's say, explored, I remember coming back to Qatar and every time feeling that I have a responsibility to share whatever knowledge and information that I learned. And I think at that time, I started thinking and trying to understand how can I inspire people of Qatar to adapt to a different lifestyle, or to start eating a little bit better, or start focusing on what they put in their body or on their consumable habits. And I think at that point, I guess that's where innovation came in. And I said innovation sometimes can differ from a person to a different person. It's subjective. For me, innovation was for me to bring a lifestyle that doesn't exist in Qatar and try to convince people here in Qatar that this is the way to go. But innovation doesn't have to just stick to technology. Innovation can be in any kind of, I would say, form of change. I would say innovation is about change, and I think whatever that change be to, is it to the environment, is it to the health, is it to the wellness, is it to enhance people's lifestyle? I think that's kind of where I gained my I would say my driving force, which is like, I wanted to make people feel better because I felt better on this lifestyle. I felt better knowing this information. And I wanted everyone else to do that. So that's where Evergreen came in. And Evergreen was an idea of like, how can I inspire people? How can I change people's lives in Doha that hasn't traveled the world, hasn't met all these people, didn't try all these amazing food that I tried, or met those amazing people with these experiences in one place in Qatar. And I think that's why Evergreen today is not just a cafe. It was meant to be a community. People kind of come together, like-minded people that can share the same idea and same thoughts about sustainability, health, and wellness. And then from that, I guess that's when I started thinking, wow, the impact that a restaurant can have on a community was much more bigger than what we thought it could be. It was meant to be a small business. Now it became something like a move. It became like it actually now is a movement. And I feel like it's something that is have changed people's habit, but also changed organizations' habits and made people here a little bit more aware and made the country a little bit focused on health and wellness. And I think now people look at it from a different side. So from that point, I started thinking, what else can we do? What other aspect? Because food is not everything. You know, sustainability is a lifestyle, is connected with many different things. And I think that's when, let's say, Botany came in. It's a skincare brand that I've launched 4 years ago also, where I wanted to create a product that can be safe for everybody's use, a product that people can use on their skin without feeling that they need to read the ingredients, because the ingredients are so like obvious and clear. Trying to also think about the packaging that went into the products, and I think that question have led me to my third business, which is Papercut, which I remember 5 days after the blockade, which we had here in Qatar, we were faced with a big challenge of sourcing packaging for my restaurant and for my skincare business. And I remember being in a place where I felt, oh my God, like no one is doing eco-friendly packaging. I need it. I'm the first customer here in Qatar that will use that kind of product. And I felt so also so bad selling all my products in non-eco-friendly packaging. And I felt, how can I make the picture a little bit more full, I would say. And I think that's when I started making eco-friendly packaging here in Qatar, and then supplying my own restaurants and my own businesses. And suddenly other businesses started becoming more interested in my product. And then now I'm supplying 150 other restaurants in Qatar. So I think this is kind of like, I believe that every business that I've done, the innovation aspect from it was coming from a place of ego, I would say, because it was always meant to benefit me first as a business owner or as a person who lives in Qatar. And then suddenly I find out that there's actually thousands of other people who wants the same thing. And maybe that's not a great place to start with, but I believe for me, it was definitely the drive force, because that I'm the first customer. I'm the one who's going to buy it. So it made sense to me that I have to start it myself, because I felt like if I'm going to wait for someone else, it's not going to happen. And then, of course, it went from that to now having 7 companies that are all revolving around plant-based food, health and wellness and well-being. I've opened recently my new spa, which is focusing on skincare and facials and making people feel better with nature goods. And I think my mission was to kind of change and disrupt the narratives that we've had here in the country and around the world, because it's something that we have been fed for over 20, 30, 40 years since the industry have boomed, with all of these information that have led us to be unhealthy or have led us be unsatisfied with our lives. So I think when we specifically, let's say, focus on innovation, I think innovation is something that you see a problem and you go and try to solve that problem with a solution that will enhance people's lives. I feel innovation, if it's not going to enhance people's lives, I don't believe that's innovation. Because if you're going to just make people feel worse than where you found them, I feel that's not innovation. Innovation should always make people feel better. And I think that's something that I always say to people who ever want to start their business, or my message to entrepreneurs out there is that make sure that your business always leave people better than where you left them. And not just people, but also the environment and the animals. So if you're going to hurt the environment by doing your business, I always say to people, that's not a great business, because at the end of the day, you're making us happy, but then the earth is not happy. Or let's say you're making me happy, but the animals are not happy, so we need to think of the bigger picture. We need to think of every creature on this planet and every, I would say, all the impacts or all the issues that are going to be affected by you producing whatever you're going to produce or creating what you're creating. So yeah, I hope that I'm an innovator. I don't call myself an innovator, but some people do. But I like to call myself somebody who just wanted to change my own lifestyle. And then I ended up changing, I guess, part of the community, I would say.
Thank you so much. I'm getting text messages from people who are on it saying, amazing, amazing. I want to know more. I want to know more. But right at this point, is there any questions anybody has for our first speaker? Clearly, if you live in Qatar, if you're here, if you're in the UK and you're visiting this meeting, you won't know really how this is a movement. And your companies have you and now your companies have started a movement in this country. But at this point, I have 2 questions in the room. Well, first one is, do you miss non-planned food?
Okay, so I think this question is very interesting because I get it a lot. I think being a Qatari, someone who grew up in the region and grew up here in Doha, yes, I've lived in the US, I've lived in Hong Kong. I had a little bit of an international, let's say, influence when it comes to my diet. But I would say I definitely come from a meat eater family. Like I ate meat, I ate chicken, I ate fish, I ate everything that everybody eats usually in their lives, and all the fast food that you can talk about. And so do I miss non-vegan product? No. And I think that's the answer to this. Is sometimes people be like, oh, no way, I'm sure you're lying. And I think my way of seeing it is that I've done my transition from being let's say a non-vegan to a vegan through a 1-year kind of like transition process. So that transition process have led me not to miss any of the elements. I've kind of eliminated the chicken first, and then 3 months later, I've eliminated fish, and then I've eliminated meat. And then, so I took my time, and I took my, the whole time that my body needs to adapt to my new lifestyle. And I think once I did that, I never looked back. And that's actually taking me back to where it started. It was a challenge. I remember waking up one day back in 2014, and I said to myself, wow, it's been almost 3 months. I haven't eaten any meat or chicken or fish. And I was like, okay, how about I go for 1-year challenge? Like, let me go for this whole year, no animal products. If it worked, it worked. If it doesn't work, no harm is there. I'm gonna go back and eat the same thing. And I never went back. And I think that's kind of the way I've done it. And I think some people wake up the next morning and they go vegan. And most vegans are like that. They wake up one day and say, okay, I'm gonna go vegan. I didn't do that. And I think I knew that this is for me is a long-term thing. And this is an investment for myself. And I wanted to do it and take my time. And that's why I never went back, and I never cheated or I ate chicken or fish or by mistake, never. So, which is great. And I hope it stays like that. A lot of people also ask you question, like, would you be like, I don't know if I'm gonna be vegan in 10 years from today. What I know is that I've been vegan now for 8 years, I would say, 8 to 7 years. Did I know that I'm gonna be vegan 9 years ago today? No. So that's the thing when people say, would you be vegan for the rest of your life? I think it's the best solution for this world, for this time. You never know, maybe eating fruits only, but in 10 years from today will be the healthiest diet, maybe eating nothing, or you never know, I don't know. I believe that there is always enhancing of, there's a constant research and constant information that are being fed by the industry as of today, and the medical field that we need to analyze and keep asking questions, of course. But for me, I believe that today, in today's world, in 2021, I think veganism is the solution for a lot of our issues.
Awesome. Thank you. I do have, there's a question in the room, but there's also a separate part of that. I think one thing that blows me away about your journey, your life, is the way it is really about doing good, making the world a better place, making Qatar a better place, making the people around you better. What would you tell a student, or how would you advise a student, and who kind of advised you to really understand that if we're going to do this right, we've got to make sure it doesn't destroy what we're actually trying to build and create? What would you recommend for that? Or how would you say that to a student?
Well, I believe like I believe all the students nowadays are more aware and more conscious than how we were taught before, or the schools that we were going through, like the programs that we were given. I feel like nowadays kids and children and students are much more knowledgeable and aware, and they're much more smarter than us. They do stuff that we did when we were in the 20s, and I think that's something like very inspiring and empowering also. So I do believe that they definitely have a little bit more of an advantage than where we come from. So I'm sure they are going to be better than us. When it comes to, I'd say, the impact that they're going to have, I think, I'll give you an example. Like a few days ago, I was sitting with my nieces, so with my sister also there, and my nephews and my whole family were sitting on the table, and they've all watched this new documentary called Seaspiracy, which just came out on Netflix. And the kids, all of the kids are saying, oh my God, we're not eating fish anymore. We're going to go vegan the next day. They don't understand that. They just got scared, of course, of all the footage and stuff like that they've been seeing. So in my opinion, kids and students will always make the best choice. I think the influence of the community, and then what, let's say, my sister said to them and what my family have said to them, it's like, oh, it's impossible. Even though I run 7 businesses that are all vegan and can deliver to any of them free of charge if they want to, if they even ask me, they keep saying, oh, it's so hard to go vegan. And I'm like, okay, you know what? Some people are just always have this kind of excuse when it comes to solution. But I think kids, if they are allowed, if they are given the chance, if they are students also, they're giving the chance to express themselves, make their own choices, make their own decisions, I think they can make a huge impact, and they can see it. And they can see it because, I'm sure nowadays, as I said, students are they're more powerful than us. They have more gadgets to express themselves, like on social media. They are more vocal about their feelings than us. I think we come from I would say, an era where we weren't, let's say, expressing ourselves in the way they are doing today. So I do think they have more chances to make their own mind. And to be honest, it's common sense. If you see those documentaries, or you try to read a little bit and research, you would just make your own decision. So I believe there's a lot. That's my kind of way of seeing it. Sorry, I've just branched out a little bit.
You continue to branch out, because everywhere you go, you're making things better. So I really appreciate you joining us here tonight. And I want to thank you for sharing with us. And if you want to stay on, it'd be great as we go through the rest of the speakers. And then at the end, maybe we can come back. But thanks for everything you're doing. And again, Ghanim visited our school, and he was certainly a celebrity with the students. It was very, very loud when he was there. Our next guest is Tamsin Greulich-Smith. She is the director of School of X at DesignSingapore Council. She's a fellow of the Royal Society for Public Health and co-learning faculty member for the Center for Healthcare Innovation. She has over 20 years of international experience in delivering change and transformation programs, integrating risk communications, change leadership, and social innovation practices. So I do want to thank you for joining us. And if you can kind of reflect with our community on some of the key projects that really help transform your industry, your area of expertise. I really appreciate you joining us, and if you could share with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Robert, and good evening, everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. It's about 10:30 at night over here in Singapore, so if I look a little bit sleepy, forgive me. And I have to step into big shoes behind Ghanim there. Thank you so much, so inspiring. You took me back to the beginning of my journey. I actually started in environmental science, so I feel it was a very powerful journey for me. Although I'm not currently working in that field, of course, it's something you're driven to through passion, and I feel passion is also clearly driving you, and I think that's a key thing in any innovator's spirit as well. We need to kind of connect into the thing that inspires us. For me, the starting point in environmental science was powerful because the environment is an ecosystem. We live in a digital ecosystem today. Everything is interconnected, and we've seen that with one tiny little virus. One tiny little bug over the past year has flipped everything we knew upside down, and the knock-on effects just keep on rolling. So to me, the innovator needs to embrace that level of complexity with excitement and passion and say, okay, many things could go wrong, but actually what's the flip side to this? So thank you for inviting me to share a little bit about my journey. Actually, I've got some slides, maybe I could pull up. Will that work? That might be a little bit more interesting than just looking at my face. I hope you can all see that okay. Yay, thank you, Robert. Okay, this is actually a photo of a hospital in Singapore. I moved to Singapore around 9 years ago from the freezing cold UK. And in the UK, we don't have hospitals that look quite as amazing as this. We have wonderful hospitals in the UK, but we don't have the climate we have in Singapore here. So this is a hospital called Kutek Hospital in the north of Singapore. And it's been designed to be a hospital in a garden and a garden in a hospital. And that's because at the very core of what they believe in this hospital is that plants create a healing environment, and this will help their patients to heal quicker. And the reason I have this photo up here is because this hospital actually has as its core value innovation. Everyone that joins the organization is brought up to a certain level in terms of understanding innovation and what it means for healthcare. So I can share a little bit about the healthcare journey I've had in Singapore here. I moved actually into the healthcare space quite early in my career. So although I'm an environmental scientist by training, the links between environment and health, as Ghanim has just eloquently shared, are inseparable. So again, it comes back to that lens, that systems lens of everything being interconnected. The more I looked into how we can help people think about their environmental impacts, the more I realized we actually care more about ourselves. I know human beings are selfish, and actually to a certain extent we care about our health. The worrying thing for any healthcare provider is that we only really care about our health when it goes wrong. And I'll come on to that in a minute, but we care slightly more about our health than we do the environment. So it can be quite a powerful way of getting people to think about their environmental impacts. So I start with that. But before I maybe tell you any more about where I've been, I thought I would ask a few questions. What do we think the following pictures have in common? This is a photo in 1876 of the first telephone call. Okay, I'm posing this out there. I'm not sure how many people can shout out or answer. So 1876, the first telephone call. In 1886, we have the first punched card for data processing. You might wonder where I'm going here. 1948, monkeys were sent into space for the first time. And 2011, over here in Singapore, we had something called aging in place, where nurses started going into seniors' homes. So I won't pause for answers, because I think on Zoom, sometimes it's not so easy to bring the answer. The answer is actually all of these are examples of innovation for healthcare. When we think about innovation, we tend to think about very exciting space age kind of things. We think about Google Labs, and we think about cars that will go on some kind of hyperloop. We think about really radical things. When we think about healthcare innovation, we might think about robots, and for sure there are robots transforming healthcare at the moment in many, many different ways. But sometimes we don't think that healthcare innovation, number one, has been around for many, many, many years. For any young people listening in, 1876 is even older than I am. Yeah. Way back when Alexander Graham Bell made that first telephone call, this was actually linked to healthcare. He was actually researching hearing devices, and that's how he came to actually develop the telephone call. He was a bit annoyed apparently at the time because it was an accident. And that's one of the wonderful other things about innovation, that's serendipity, those accidental discoveries that many of you will have studied about. Penicillin is another one, those innovative discoveries that are kind of accidental. And that's the wonderful thing. An innovator needs to be open to the unexpected. There's also a rumor that actually when Alexander Graham Bell made the first telephone call, he had actually spilt acid on his trousers, and he was calling his friend Thomas Watson to come and help. And I like to believe that story, and I don't know if it's true, but let's go with it because it sounds quite cool. Huh? That's a healthcare story. But nonetheless, certainly he was looking at assistive devices, as we like to call them. The first punch card for data, any person who's younger, I guess, than 21 listening in will wonder what on earth that is. But back in the olden days, computers used to look a bit like this, and we had these solids, these hard pieces of card that had different holes punched in them, and from that we could process data. So these are very, very effectively, we could say this is the very earliest imagination of artificial intelligence, but it's so far removed, I think we couldn't really pull such a grand claim. But the first use of a punch card for data back in 1886 with IBM, as they were then in their early guise, was actually for medical records. So again, innovation in healthcare is not a new thing. Monkeys in space, what on earth has this got to do with healthcare? Actually, the reason NASA started sending monkeys into space was because they needed to understand about remote healthcare. Remote healthcare gets a lot of attention now, particularly over the past year. We've seen a lot of growth in remote healthcare. How can we provide medical services to people who can't actually come into a hospital or can't come and meet their doctor? At the moment, we've had that because of the pandemic. We've had a lot of safe distancing, but actually for people living in remote areas, they've been dependent on remote healthcare for quite some time. But it all began way back here with the monkeys being sent into space so that clinicians on the ground could work out how they might be able to look after astronauts who might eventually be sent up in a rocket of their own. So again, interestingly, a different face of healthcare innovation, and which really set the scene for exploring how we would start to see some of the remote healthcare we see today. And finally, aging in place. Aging in place is a very local service we have here in Singapore. And it might not seem like an innovation because it's very, very simple. Nurses go into seniors' homes and they care for them in their home, and then they come back to the hospital. Wow, that's not very exciting, is it? Definitely not space age. But it actually came to solve a really critical problem. In hospitals, we have some patients that are known as frequent flyers. They go into hospital far more frequently than the average patient. I hope that all of us listening in don't have the chance to go into hospital as patients very often, because if so, it means we're battling with some horrible disease or ailment of some other kind, and we need regular treatment. Some people are more prone to needing to go into hospital a lot. And there were some patients that the hospital itself, Kutek Hospital, the leafy hospital at the front of my deck, they didn't understand why these patients kept coming in. The patients were coming in with different kind of problems every time, although they might be linked. And they would be seeing these patients several times a year. In fact, for many of them, it could be 12 to 15 times a year that they're going into the hospital for different kind of incidents. It might be a broken hip or a twisted ankle or a medication overdose. So the CEO of the hospital said, we need to kind of get to the bottom of this. And he himself went into people's homes. He was quite intimidating, but brilliant guy. And he turned up on their doorsteps and said, I want to find out why you keep turning up at my hospital. And he probably put it as bluntly as that. And he walked in and he was really surprised at what he saw. He started to see people living in very cramped and messy conditions, a lot of cluttered materials all around, so very many trip hazards. He found that there were people there with lots of chronic illnesses, so they needed to take lots and lots of different medication, but they were confused. Anyone that's ever been to the doctor and had more than one medication prescribed will be in the same position. I'm confused about when to take what and whether to eat before or eat after and whether to have water or whether not, and it can become quite confusing. So really worryingly, for some of these seniors, they were just pouring all of their medication into a bowl and grabbing a handful every day and hoping that somehow that would work. And of course it didn't. For some of them, it made them terribly ill. So there were many different reasons why these patients kept returning to the hospital. So they introduced this program called Aging in Place, whereby the nurses would actually go into the people's homes and help them think about what they needed to do to take care of themselves. They actually removed the trip hazards. They put ramps into homes. They helped them make sense of the medication management. And in this way, they dramatically reduced the number of people turning up into hospital. It became a national program in the end because it was so successful. So I share these examples to say innovation isn't radical and new. It's really about understanding a need. And for all of these situations, they were trying to meet a specific need. And innovation can be very simple. And I'm a real believer in making innovation accessible to people. I think we all have the power to transform the world around us. And Ghanim has shown that already. So I think, if anything, that's really the journey I've been on, is to try to really democratize design and innovation in that way. I was asked to talk a little bit about the healthcare side of my journey, and that has been a large chunk of my journey, although a lot of my career has focused on innovation in other very complex domains. Healthcare is one of the most complicated and complex domains to transform because it involves very sick people. Human beings are the most complex things in our planet. And so therefore we need to really think about very, very sensitive solutions when we're designing there. But I've also worked in situations, for example, where we've had civil engineering projects in the UK with a lot of protest activity. In the UK, we sometimes like to protest about things, and that means progress can be slow. There's a great reason for doing so, and I firmly believe that if we can bring all those different people together, we can work through many of those challenges. So I spent a lot of my career trying to help people come together and co-design solutions. On the healthcare side, we face a lot of challenges because the system itself is struggling to cope with human beings and their health. This means that because we're asking for more healthcare support, costs are starting to rise. We don't necessarily have enough resources to meet all the healthcare demands. And in fact, the model of care that we have in most countries was designed at a time when we didn't disease and get ill in the same way. We used to tend to get maybe a terrible disease that would kill us very, very quickly, or we might break our neck falling off a ladder and it would be over and done with quite quickly, or we might break an arm and then be fixed and sent away. Nowadays, a lot of people struggle with diseases that last quite a long time. They can last all of your life and mean you need a lot of treatment. And so the care model struggles to deal with that. The other thing is we're not very good at looking after our health. So when we're healthy, we kind of take that for granted. When we feel sick, we ask a doctor to fix us or a nurse to fix us, and we think that can be a quite simple process. And as a result of that, we end up sometimes taking more risks with our health than we should. So that ends up with more people going into hospitals. So you can see on that very simple level, it's quite a congested area. And there's different ways that we can look at healthcare innovation as a result of that. I'm going to very, very quickly run through this before I finish. on a very simple way, we look at this healthcare innovation ladder in terms of product design, which is quite a simple and straightforward in some respects aspect. You can look at a specific product and how that might be designed to help a very specific need. You can also look at the next level up, which is service design, and that starts to think about, for example, the journey we have when we might go to a hospital. What is the patient journey when we, even before we've left home, we might need to phone for an ambulance? What is our experience like as we go through and arrive at the hospital and register and meet a nurse to be triaged and so on? So service design looks at some of those kind of experience aspects of innovation. We can then look at strategic design, which might be more at the level of the hospital. How might the hospital redesign the whole way it delivers its services, its care model, in order to better meet the needs of the patients today? And then finally, the area I love the most, but it's the most overwhelming and complex, which is what I like to call impact design. And that's really looking at the whole ecosystem and saying, what do we need to change to have lasting impact? And I like to believe Ghanim is in that space already, because you're looking at creating a movement, and that's exactly the kind of thing we're talking about. Multiple approaches to creating a specific impact. And impact design looks at the end result you're trying to achieve and the very different routes you can take towards getting there, and bringing different players together rather than one organization. I'm going to quickly share some examples of some projects I've worked on that map against this ladder, just to help make sense. Here's my ex-colleague Matt. Matt was one of the researchers that worked in my team at National University of Singapore. I set up something called the Smart Health Leadership Centre whilst I was working at National University of Singapore. And our mission was to transform the future experience of health through data, technology, and design. So everything that we did was about achieving impacts and certain outcomes and looking at different ways of getting there. This was one of the projects that we ran that got a lot of media attention, actually. I called it Smart Socks because at the beginning we were looking at socks. But if any of you have ever been to Singapore, you know that not many people wear socks. It's really, you can see, really hot and humid, even at nearly 11 o'clock at night. So we started with socks, and the socks were designed to have, it was an AI device that had vibration soles in the socks. And this was designed to help people with Parkinson's disease. The sole in the sock starts to understand the way that the user, the patient, is walking, and can then send little very light electrical pulses into the foot of that person to help them better walk when they have Parkinson's disease. There was a big impact on that around once someone has something like Parkinson's disease and they start falling over, they become very self-conscious and fearful, so they tend to stay at home more. And this actually results in other illnesses as well. It can lead to chronic depression, it can lead to obesity, and so on and so forth. So you can see again how everything is interlinked. So this was one of our lovely projects we had a big research grant for. And very early on in the project, we discovered, okay, no one wants to wear socks. So we had to change it. It then became an anklet, and it looked a bit like something that prisoners might be given. But anyway, nonetheless, it still worked. And it was a really interesting project that helped us understand about how to design for people with specific conditions. A different project that I worked with, and this was actually because it was the only photo I had to hand, it wasn't the best example, but this was from a hospital, Unteng Fong General Hospital in Singapore, in Jurong. And they have a big problem, as a lot of hospitals do, which is they have large queues at the accident and emergency department. And part of the reason for the large queues at the A&E department is that the patients can't get onto the hospital wards. There are no beds available on the hospital wards. And a large part of the reason for that is that the patients that are ready to be discharged haven't yet left the beds. And sometimes the reason they haven't left the bed is because the doctor hasn't finished his rounds yet, or they're waiting for a certain medication. And it can be all sorts of very simple problems. And they can end up holding a bed for an entire day while the accident and emergency department gets busier and busier and busier. So these nurses that I've been working with designed a new process, a new service, and this is on the service design level, whereby they would discharge all the ready patients before midday and take them to this discharge lounge. Now, I hasten to add, this was their prototype, yeah, this was their mock-up. The end result looked a lot sexier than this, yeah. But this was their prototype, and you can see they tested this out with nurses first of all, and then with real patients and patient families, trying to see what kind of things would be nice in the discharge lounge, so that patients would see this as a nice transitional part of their discharge experience. They would also take the opportunity here to give educational advice to the patients to ideally help them recover better once they were at home. So there was a whole service around this. It's just the photo only really shows how interesting the room looked. I was about to say pretty, I'm not sure if it's that pretty, but nonetheless. So the aim of this was to allow people from the accident emergency department to get into their hospital beds a lot more quickly. To do that, they had to focus on the discharge part of other patients' journeys. So again, it shows how interconnected everything is. This then leads me onto strategic design. This was the first healthcare project I did in Singapore. And in fact, it was this project that inspired me to establish the Smart Health Leadership Centre. So I'm a true innovator. I'm permanently looking for opportunities to drive change. I was asked to go and lead a transformation project for the hospital with all the leafy greens. When I was taken up there on my second day at work at NUS, I was told I'd be leading a transformation program. And I stood and looked around this dream hospital and I said, transformation? My goodness me, what on earth needs transforming? This place is like a miracle. But actually their big challenge was, again, it related to some of the problems I'd shown you earlier. People are diseasing differently and the model of care couldn't accommodate it. So I spent 2.5 years working with the team there as we redesigned the whole way that organization would deliver care. It was a huge, challenging, wonderful project, and they're still rolling it out now. We started this, I think, at the end of 2013, and they're still rolling that program out now. So you see, these bigger strategic design programs take a lot longer and many different parts to them. And finally, this was a lovely little project that gained so much attention. There have been TV documentaries about this, and it was quite bizarre. And it was bizarre it got so much attention, but it was simply because we were trying to use artificial intelligence to help seniors living in social isolation. Again, if we go back to the hospital problems of frequent flyers, what the hospitals told me was that the patients that are at greatest risk of coming back into the hospital over and over again are those ones who live alone and who are socially isolated. They don't have family, friend network. They don't look after themselves very well at all. So we tried an experiment. I had been working with all the little logos you see on the side there. The one that looks like the stethoscope was my logo. I had been working with Yishun Health, one of our hospital providers who had the problem with the frequent flyers. I had also been working with Lions Befrienders, which is a volunteer agency across Singapore that tries to find seniors who are socially isolated and give them befriending volunteers to help look after them. And Allied World Healthcare is a social enterprise that provides technology solutions for healthcare transformation. We all came together, we designed this Alexa, so it was very simple, off the shelf, Amazon Alexa chatbot solution. And Alexa was designed to chat to the seniors. Alexa was connected to their care plans. So Alexa can remind them to take the medicine, the correct medicine. You need to take the yellow pills. Have you had your breakfast? If you're not hungry, have a Milo. So Alexa understood the real behaviors and challenges that the seniors faced. You have an appointment with Dr. Tan today at 2 o'clock. You may want to take the bus. And really engage with them. Alexa was also connected to the activities calendar in the local senior centre. So Alexa would nudge them to go and get involved with things. The wonderful thing was seniors really made relationships with Alexa. When they left their home, they actually waved to Alexa and say, bye Alexa, I'm going now. And this was an amazing thing. Alexa became a really trusted friend for them. So that's been a super quick run through some of the different wonderful projects I've had the chance to work on. Finally, before I end, just really to share, this is what I do now. My new job, I work at DesignSingapore Council, is running something called the School of X, a different kind of school to the one we're in today, but it's about bringing design and innovation to everyone in Singapore. It's been established by DesignSingapore Council to really help different people come together and design innovative solutions around real world social impact issues. And it can be as simple as, how do I stop people littering in my street? So this is a wonderful journey we're on now. Feel free, if you're interested to find out more, to reach out to me there, but I will stop now and allow someone else to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Tamsin. you kind of brought us to a point of education. And the next speaker actually is part of ACS. So I think this is a great segue. If we can hold questions off until the end to maybe ask all the participants. I do know somebody put a question in the room, and I'll save that for the end and ask all three. But I do want to introduce Brianna Gray. Brianna Gray is Professional Learning and Growth Lead at ACS International School. She's a lifelong learner with a decade of classroom teaching experience in technology and special education. Brianna is passionate about advancing ACS's culture of continuous improvement and has led professional learning workshops for teachers and school leaders around the world. Brianna will explore innovation in a crisis, because that's what she is working with us online, and the relationship between creativity and innovation, and how ACS International Schools are getting their students ready to become the world's next innovators. And we have two incredible role models who just spoke. And I think Brianna is going to share what we're doing as a school to maybe help that.
Absolutely.
So
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. Yes, hard acts to follow, but also I'm just feeling super inspired right now. So that's always a nice place to start speaking. I'm gonna, let's see, I'll show some slides too. I'm approaching the topic of innovation from a very specific lens of education. My world is education. I started Montessori school when I was 2 years old, and I engaged in my own formal education for the next 25 years. My mom is a teacher. My sister is a teacher. I became a teacher when I was 22 years old. All of my best friends work in education. So that's where I am. And oh, let's see. I've got, for the past 10 years, my world has been ACS education. First, as a classroom teacher, I worked, as Robert was saying, in both special education and technology. I've taught high school and middle school, and then I now work for all 4 ACS campuses in the world of professional learning. So it's very cool to get to think through continuous improvement through a professional learning lens. And there's always opportunities for growth. I think if there's one thing that education sort of as a field teaches us, it's that there's always something new to learn. I've already learned a bunch in the past 40 minutes. And very little of our world is static, right? So it's essential that we're always adapting, reflecting, challenging things that we already know to see if there's a new or better way of thinking. And as a lifelong learner, I always like to think about what all the experts have to say on a topic. So I have a few quotations from leading innovators that I thought could guide our thinking as we talk through what ACS is up to and the connections between innovation and creativity. So we've got Steve Jobs, who has given us one way to define innovation. I'm going to sit with this for a moment. It's the ability to see change as an opportunity, not a threat. And I think that we've just heard from 2 people who've really embodied this sense of opportunity. For those of you who are in attendance, if you just want to think for a second to yourself about a change that you've personally experienced that may have seemed like a threat at first, but then became an opportunity. I know that an easy place to go is to think about a career or a location change, maybe that you didn't instigate, but you could have thought of the day that your teenager started driving, potentially a threat that then becomes an opportunity. But if we think about different ways that we can respond to change through innovation, whether that change was created or forced upon us, then we can go through and discover why everyone is so eager to hire and cultivate innovators, right? Because that's the thing. There's been loads of research on this topic. It's a historically sort of tricky area to pin down, but we know that innovators are curious, and we know that they've been identified as all having creative intelligence. And one of my colleagues spends a considerable amount of time exploring creativity, and she actually shared this fact with me about the UK workforce in 2015. And at that point, creativity accounted for 26 million jobs just in the one country. And they estimated that within a 15-year period, they were going to need a million additional creative careers to ensure economic stability. So it's not just about, finding your passion project and moving forward, but it's really finding that niche where you can thrive and our children can thrive and continue to impact the world for the better. And that can be moral and ethical innovation as well, and creativity. So how can we separate creativity from innovation? They're deeply linked, but it is helpful to think of them as separate functions. Here's one way that Theodore Levitt of the Harvard Business School put it. He said that creativity is thinking new things and innovation is doing new things. This is the same guy who popularized the term globalisation. So we can sit with his definitions for a bit. Thinking new things and doing new things. So my question, sort of tongue-in-cheek really, is are there any new things in your life in, say, I don't know, the past 13, 14 months? These are the things that immediately came to my mind, some for the better and some for the worse, but they were all changes that were thrust upon us. Was it Tamson that was mentioning that tiny little virus making a huge difference? And so we need to start to think, this is my last quote for a little while, I promise, but we need to think about breaking out of our established patterns and looking at things in a different way. All right, so is there any stronger way to be forced into thinking in a new way than a global pandemic? And it's that turned all of our normal ways of operating into disease spreading conditions. So we've got a variety of innovative things that have happened in the past year, and a shift in the way we've been thinking that is going to carry us forward, and probably more importantly, going to carry our students and the next generations forward into perpetuity. So I could talk about the vaccines that have been developed. I could talk about air filtration technology. I could talk about all the life-saving medical methodology. They're incredibly important things. I hope that you've all had an opportunity or will have an opportunity to dive into a bit more about some of those life-saving innovations that came out this year. But I'm gonna pause here with the pool noodle. Okay, we're gonna take a moment and think smaller, considering our own lives, everyday opportunities to think creatively. These little pieces or large pieces of plastic were invented in Canada in the 1980s. It's actually a pretty interesting origin story that I'm not going to go into, but it is on the internet. There's some YouTube videos you could watch on the origins of the pool noodle. I will tell you that there are between 12 and 16 million of these sold every year, and they are not patented. So if that's of interest to you, they are out there. Now, I'm going to take a pause for 30 seconds. It's going to be really awkward because webinars with silence in them always feel funny. But if there are people in the room with you, you can talk with them, or you can use the chat. I think I've opened it up so that everyone can see each other's chats. And my challenge to you is in the next 25 to 30 seconds, consider how many ways you might use a pool noodle beyond its traditional use, which is to support a swimmer in a pool. All right, so talk to the people in the room with you, put them in the chat. How else might you use a pool noodle besides swimming with it? loads of ideas coming in. I think too visible just to the panelists for some of those, but there we go. A new lightsaber was going to come out. All right, and for the last 10 seconds of this challenge, are there any ways that you can think of that we might use a pool noodle specifically during a pandemic? There we go. All right, there are, oh my gosh, there's so many good ideas. I have to say that there is literally a book written called, I think it's called 50 Ways to Use Your Noodle by a man called Chris Cavert. So if you're interested, you can buy a book on 50 different ways to use a pool noodle, but I really like some of the ones that we've got coming in here. In Germany, in May 2020, a cafe needed to reopen safely, needed to keep their customers distance from each other. And so they invented these very low cost straw hats that all of the customers would wear, because they figured out that this would keep two hats together would keep customers at the 1.5 meter distance that the German government was recommending at the time. And it was done very lightheartedly. They knew it was all in good fun, but it also served a purpose beyond allowing them to keep their businesses open or to reopen safely and protect their customers, but still have their source of income for the owners. So that was one, and I appreciate the people who have already spotted in the chat that social distancing, this is all we need. So Mr. Robert, when you reopen your doors, just hand over, but also know that they could be used as lightsabers. So you look ready. Now, what if we start with a scenario instead of a tool? Okay, so here's our scenario. We have a group of kids who haven't seen each other in a while. They need physical activity. They're all going to come back together. How do we keep them safe, but allow them to socially engage with each other and participate in physical activity? If you are ACS Doha International School, you use a hula hoop, not just for its traditional waist ab building exercise. This is a part of the, I think, early childhood flash mob, and all of the students perfectly engaged, had a great time, and stayed in their hula hoops because it was a very clear parameter. I love that this is also bringing in the technology of Miss Rachel doing the steps for those who can't attend the flash mob in person. So this is just bringing all sorts of innovation in together, but really, really creative use of space and tools. So how can we ensure that the learning conditions that we're setting up for our students are preparing them to be the innovators of the future? We know that tools are absolutely essential. So you need to connect people with the 3D printers, coding software, and the training to go along with it, all of the latest technology, film, video editing, even forest schools equipment to allow students to design things outside. In some of our UK campuses, that was really taking off. You really need space that will create the best conditions for innovation. Some of the thrilling stuff that's come out with the new campus design and the new buildings, providing both indoor and outdoor space that really flexes. I also think that one of the more innovative building spaces I've seen lately is in the National Library in Qatar. Some really cool creative flex space there as well. But probably most importantly, we need to have those opportunities to build those discovery skills. So the Harvard Business Review did a 6-year study of nearly 4,000 innovators, whether it was inventors or executives, and established that there are 5 key skills that innovators have, the most successful ones have and exhibit: connecting, questioning, observing, networking, and experimenting. And they very nicely link with the IB learner profile and the approaches to learning. So there is a lot of overlap, and I don't think that the IB was consulting the Harvard Business Review when they were designing their program, but I also don't think it's a coincidence that those traits are all associated with innovation. So we have examples. I mean, I could talk all day about these things, but we have examples of each of these skills. Our students are connecting in so many ways. Who knew that social distancing would create the most innovative ways of connecting with people? This is a high school music assembly. I know when they did parent-teacher conferences recently, Mr. Robert was sharing there was like over 90% turnout of parents and teachers and students coming together to talk about their learning in a virtual, safe place. We use questioning actively all the time. I will just share very briefly a story that one of my colleagues shared with me about ways that our adults are also using questioning to encourage creativity. There was a teacher doing an addition review maths lesson, right? So we've all been there, first grade-ish. And she said, 2 + 2, that's what class? And all the students were calling out 4. And one child had her hand raised, and the teacher said, Sophia, can you share about 2 + 2? And she said, it doesn't always equal 4. And the teacher had a choice. She could say, no, it does. Here's our manipulatives. Let's count them. But instead, she said, can you tell me more about that? And Sophia said, well, if you have 2 very hungry cats and 2 very small birds, and you put them together, you have 2 very full cats. And again, the teacher had a choice. She could say, haha, I guess you're right. Okay, let's get back to our maths review. But instead, she said, I hadn't considered that before. That is a very creative way of thinking. Can anyone else think about a way that 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4? And it's those sorts of opportunities that are developing and encouraging our innovators and designers and developers and creators of the future. We've got all of our opportunities to do fantastic observation and experimentation. And then of course, connecting. I think that if we think the present is digital, the future is going to be even more so. And our students are absolutely leading the way, from choreographing TikToks to publishing iBooks to coding games and writing, filming, editing, sharing their videos. There are always opportunities for networking, and students are designing their own. So it is something that we are pretty passionate about, and students are doing it in their own communities beyond ACS as well. So I will leave you with Paulo Coelho's thought that everyone has creative potential, and that creative intelligence that I talked about before is something that can be learned. It doesn't have to be something that you're born with or have innately. It is something that can be developed. And I would argue that ACS students are some of my favorite examples, people who are ready to change the world for the better and become our next global thinkers. So thank you for letting me share thoughts on innovation today.
Thank you, Brianna. It's now time to summarize, to really look back on the evening and what we heard. And I do want to finish up with this one question for the 3 panelists, if you don't mind, because I think it's a great question that was put in the chat room. And it also can kind of summarize it, because I feel inspired. And I know, Brianna, you said that after going after those 2 speakers, you were inspired as well. That is clearly a key ingredient. But I think the question they ask is, what was your secret ingredient that makes you make things happen? You know, what is it about you? What was it, your journey? What was the person? What was that moment that changed for you? Because we have parents and kids in the room, and the kids may be looking for that moment. The kids maybe have that moment, but the parents don't know if that's the moment they want their kids to have. You know, like what was it for you that really allowed you to take that next step to move from creativity to innovation, like the definition Brianna shared? So Ghanim or Tamson, I don't know if you want to share, and then obviously Brianna as well. What was the moment, if there was a moment?
Okay, so I think I will go ahead. Well, I think it's definitely not a one moment thing. I think it's a cumulative of many different opportunities and incidents that we go through as people that are allowing us to maybe elevate our thinking or think in a different way. And then once you get to a place, I think, because I don't think there's a moment, because I still, until now, there are a lot of opportunities that are still coming, you know, on a daily basis that I think still needs innovation. So I think innovation, yes, you've done innovation, let's say 4 years ago, but that doesn't mean today's you can just pass by that opportunity and not be innovative again. So I think innovation is done on a daily basis. I think if we stop, maybe we need to stop thinking of it as a one thing and thinking of it as every decision that we make on a daily basis. Even me coming on this, let's say, panel, I've innovated in some way or another. I don't know how can you define it, but definitely we need to link it in every action that we're doing, because that will allow people not to categorize, I think, innovation to a certain way or a certain behavior. I think as the other panelists have also kind of maybe point out that it's not necessarily something that is linked to technology all the time. It's linked to opportunities and change. And I think every day on a daily basis, you have an opportunity that comes to you and is sitting right there. And it's maybe the ability for you to see that opportunity is the innovation. And I think, but it's right there. So I think, you know, I think every moment should be you know, nourished and should be given a chance. And I think every moment that the kids are thinking outside the box or outside their comfort zone, I think they should be empowered. And as I think the example that Brianna have said recently about like the 2+2 thing, even me, I got inspired by that. So I mean, can you imagine, that's another opportunity for me to innovate now moving forward or going through my life. So I think that the example can be applied to many different situations in our lives, when it comes to culture, when it comes to change, when it comes to evolving, when it comes to all the decisions that I'm making on a daily basis. That just opens up the brain and makes you think completely different, because that's for me just proved to me that, you know, education, the way we do it or the way we used to do it, is no longer the way to elevate people's mind and making them more open-minded or think differently. As you said, this is not part of our curriculum. This wasn't ever part of our curriculum. If we answered that on a test, I would not be here today. I'm an engineer by profession. That wouldn't be accepted, you know. But nowadays, that kind of answer is, I think, what would have allowed me maybe to think differently maybe 10 years ago. But now knowing this, like, or even understanding that with the way we live nowadays, and understanding that things are not the way it should be when it comes to the way we see ourselves as human, the way we see ourselves as you know, as creatures of this planet. I think this is something that we really need to empower. And I think you know, for all the parents out there that are hearing this, I think really allow your kids to think differently. It's very difficult, don't get me wrong, like all of these ideas, all of that. I meet people nowadays that are younger than me, like 10 years younger, and they have completely different ideas than what I think is right. And I need to allow them to do that, because I think every generation might always think that they are the generation to be, you know, the chosen one. And I think we need to allow always new ideas and thoughts to come in and flow by us. And we might not always agree with it, but I think that's what our parents says about us. And now we're saying this about the new generation. So
thank you so much, Ghanim. How about you, Tamsin?
I feel like I could speak for an hour. So I will resist temptation. I think I'm pretty much in alignment with everything Ghanim has said there. I think Ideas are easy, yeah. Ideas are super, for me, I'm permanently seeing ideas. I'm fueled by them. Innovation is the implementation of the idea. And as Ghanim has said, it's hard. And part of the reason hard is that human beings don't really like change very much. So when you're the innovator, you're permanently driving change and people don't like it, they resist it. So I guess I've got 4 R's, if I can say that, 4 R's as my secret sauce. And the first one is resilience. To be an innovator, you need to have that resilience to keep going and push and drive and strive and say, I find a way forward. Because if you give up the first time you encounter something goes wrong, you can't innovate. Innovation is an ongoing journey. So resilience is important. The other one is reframing. And when I teach people about design and innovation, and when I work on my own design and innovation projects, I see that the thing that's the most critical for them to tackle and the thing they trip up over the most is framing the challenge. And for any young person listening, I challenge you to really look and reframe every time you have a problem. This is a healthy way of approaching life generally. How can I flip that to see an opportunity in every problem? I'm obsessed with doing it. Maybe it's a coping strategy at times, but it's a great way of starting to unlock innovation opportunities. My other R is a word that I use in every single lecture I ever give, and that word is resonate. It's about understanding human beings. When we remember that innovation is change, we need to understand that we're changing people. And people love to go on a journey with us, but they hate being told what to do. No one likes being told what to do. So when we understand the people we're designing for, and that's not just, for example, in a hospital, it's not just a patient, we're also designing for the nurses and the doctors and the family that visits the patient. So we have to resonate with them by understanding them and then make it relevant to you. No matter what career you're going to pursue in life, innovation will transform it. So whenever I'm asked, what job do you see yourself in 5 years' time, I always have said the same thing, and it's always been true. 5 years from now, the job I'll be doing doesn't exist today, and that's been true since I was 22 years old. So go enjoy it, enjoy the ride. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Tamsin. Brianna?
I'll just me too on what they said. I think I think stay curious and never accept that something that worked in the past is still the best way of doing things. But I think also being purposeful with your solutions and your innovations has been critical. But the more you learn, like honestly, just keep getting inspired by people and reading and watching and going to things and talking to people. That's for me, that's been more, can't use the word inspiring again, but it has been. I mean, that's really what sparked any new ideas, and is to know that there is some foundation and they're going to work with other people that you've talked to. Keep connecting.
Awesome. I do want to thank everybody for coming. I do want to thank, obviously, ACS for setting up these evenings, Solomon and your team for helping to make sure they come off without a hitch, and we use innovation to get more people together. But I think the real final point, which has now continued to inspire me, is that in spite of the crisis, the challenge we're in, the challenge of negative news and all that, there are people throughout the world, and we have 3 of them in the room right now, who are innovating to improve the lives of others around them. And we cannot ask for anything more, and we really appreciate you sharing it. And I do believe that, Ghanim, the next generation of kids, they will be way better than we are. And I do appreciate you all joining us tonight. And hopefully that next group took some inspiration from this. I know we all did. Thank you, everybody. Have a good night. And Ghanim, Tamsin, and Brianna, thanks for bringing us on this journey.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.
Great to meet you all. Thank you.
Good night.